They thought I wouldn't find out. My own children, the ones I carried, fed, and prayed for every night, sold the house I built with my late husband while I was lying half conscious in a hospital bed. But what they didn't know was that a mother's silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a storm that's about to strike. Before I tell you how I made them pay rent for the very house they stole from me, make sure you subscribe to Revenge's Echo, because here, every story carries a heartbeat of justice. And don't forget to comment where you're listening from. I'd love to know who's hearing my story today. Now, let's begin. My name is Margaret Bennett, and I'm 74 years old. For most of my life, I believed I'd raised 3 good children, and I thought I had done my part as a mother to love them, to guide them, and to give them the kind of life Robert and I had dreamed of. Robert, my husband, he passed away 12 years ago. We were married for 48 years, Norm. And I still remember our first day in that little brick house in Ridgefield, Connecticut. It was 1975. The world felt different then, slower, gentler. We bought that 2-story brick home for just $29,000, though that was nearly everything we had. Robert worked as a high school English teacher, and I worked part-time at the local library. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and we had dreams. That house became the center of everything. Birthdays, Christmas dinners, summer barbecues. Robert planted rose bushes in the backyard. I painted the kitchen yellow because he said it reminded him of sunshine. Every corner of that home was touched by love. We had 3 children. Our eldest, Daniel, was born in 1978. Serious, responsible, the man of the house from the moment he could talk. Then came Melissa in 1981. Sweet, sensitive, always trying to please everyone. And finally, Jacob in 1988. The baby, the dreamer, the artist. They were my world. We weren't rich, but Robert and I made sure they had everything they needed. Piano lessons, soccer cleats, even college savings. When Robert died of a heart attack in 2013, I thought my world ended, but I stayed strong for them. The house was my anchor. It held every laugh, every tear, every prayer we'd ever whispered. Even after they all moved out and started families, I stayed there alone. I told myself that as long as I could still walk those stairs and make coffee in that yellow kitchen, I'd be fine. The years passed quietly. I joined a knitting club, volunteered at church, and made sure my roses bloomed every spring. The neighbors loved me. The old Mrs. Bennett, always smiling, always kind. But what they didn't see were the nights when loneliness crept in, nights when I'd sit by the living room window, staring at Robert's empty armchair, whispering to him about the kids, how Daniel barely visited, how Melissa only called when she needed advice, and how Jacob was struggling to find work. Still, I never complained. Mothers don't. We endure. Until one morning last winter when everything changed. It was a Thursday, December 22nd. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter. I'd been baking cookies for Christmas Eve. I climbed a small stool to reach the top shelf of the cabinet where I kept the special jar of sugar Robert had once bought me. My hand slipped, the jar fell, and so did I. Pain shot through my hip like lightning. The world spun. And then darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was in St. Mary's Hospital. Bright white walls, machines beeping, the faint scent of antiseptic. Melissa sat beside the bed, her hand clutching mine. "Mom, you scared me," she said through tears. "You fell in the kitchen. The neighbor found you." I tried to smile. My lips barely moved. Everything hurt. A doctor came in explaining that I had fractured my hip, a bad one. They said I'd need surgery and at least 2 months of recovery. Melissa nodded quickly. Don't worry, Mom. We'll handle everything. Those words, we'll handle everything, should have brought me comfort. But for some reason, they chilled me. The first week passed in a blur. Painkillers, nurses, and the quiet hum of hospital machines. Daniel visited twice, always dressed in his office suit, always busy. Mom, you shouldn't worry about the house or bills, he said one day. I'll handle it. I smiled weakly. I trusted him. He was my eldest son, after all. Melissa visited almost every day. She brought flowers, took my purse for safekeeping, and made calls about my insurance. Jacob visited once, mumbled something about being busy, then left. But sometimes when I was half asleep, I heard them whispering outside my room. I remember one afternoon, the door was slightly open and I heard Daniel's voice. She can't live there anymore, Mel. It's not safe. I know, but she loves that house, Melissa said quietly. Love won't pay the bills, Daniel snapped. She has money tied up in that property. We could sell it, use some for her care, and Daniel, Melissa whispered sharply, don't say that. Then footsteps. Silence. I tried to tell myself I'd misheard, that my children would never betray me like that. 2 months later, after surgery and therapy, I was finally discharged. Melissa drove me home. When we turned the corner of Maple Drive, my heart fluttered with excitement. The yellow porch light and the one Robert had installed glowed softly in the distance. But when we pulled into the driveway, I noticed a silver SUV parked outside, and the curtains in the living room, they weren't mine. Whose car is that? I asked. Melissa hesitated. Oh, maybe the new neighbors? New neighbors? I frowned, but that's my driveway. She didn't respond. I got out slowly, my cane tapping the pavement. The air smelled wrong, too clean, too unfamiliar. I opened the front gate, and then I saw it, a half-broken for sale sign leaning against the trash can, the logo of Harrison Realty still faintly visible. My heart stopped. I turned to Melissa. What's this? She avoided my gaze. Mom, I need to tell you something. But before she could, the front door opened and a young couple stepped out. The woman looked startled. Oh, and are you Mrs. Bennett? She asked politely. The previous owner? Previous owner. Those two words tore through me like glass. The young couple looked confused, almost guilty. The woman had a key in her hand, and the man stepped forward politely. Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry, he said, adjusting his glasses. We bought this place from your son, Daniel, right? He said you were moving to assisted living? My knees trembled. The cane slipped from my hand, clattering against the steps. Melissa rushed toward me and, Mom, please, let's talk inside the car. But I didn't move. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door where I'd once hung a welcome wreath every Christmas. Now, strangers stood behind it. I whispered, barely breathing, You sold my home? Tears filled Melissa's eyes. Mom, it was Daniel's decision. You were in the hospital? We didn't know how long. I turned slowly toward her. And you agreed? She bit her lip. We thought it was for your good. The house was old, falling apart. Daniel said, I didn't hear the rest. The world around me blurred. All I could see were memories. Robert fixing that leaky faucet, Jacob's laughter echoing down the hallway, Melissa in her prom dress on the stairs. And now Gone. Sold. That evening, I refused to leave the car until I knew what had happened. Melissa finally broke down and confessed everything. Daniel used your power of attorney, Mom, she said quietly. When you were in surgery, he said it was urgent to pay for medical expenses. He handled all the paperwork. I thought you knew. My hands shook. I gave him that paper years ago in case something happened to me. Melissa nodded, her eyes downcast. He said it was temporary, that he'd buy another small place for you once you recovered. And the money? I asked. Half went to pay bills and debts. The rest, she hesitated, he invested. With this company, I closed my eyes. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could, not strangers, my own blood. For the next few nights, I stayed in Melissa's guest room. It smelled of lavender and guilt. Every time she looked at me, I could see the shame she carried, but she never spoke against Daniel. Jacob visited on the third day. He looked tired, thinner than before, his eyes hollow. Mom, he said quietly, I didn't know. Daniel told me you approved it. I swear I studied his face. He was always my soft-hearted boy, the one who painted sunsets and wrote songs in the attic. I believed him. I want to make it right, he said. Tell me what to do. I smiled faintly. Just be patient, Jacob. Sometimes silence is the best answer. The next morning, I called Mr. Harold Whitmore, our family lawyer from decades ago. He was nearly 80 now, half retired, but still sharp as a blade. When I arrived at his small office in downtown Ridgefield, he greeted me with surprise. Margaret Bennett, my word, it's been years. How's Robert? I lowered my eyes. Gone. Long ago. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Then he noticed the tremor in my hand, the sadness in my eyes. What brings you here, Margaret? I told him everything, from the hospital to the far sale sign. He listened silently, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he exhaled deeply. Did you ever revoke that power of attorney? No, I didn't think I had to. He shook his head. Legally, Daniel had the right to sell, but morally, it's unforgivable. My throat tightened. So there's nothing I can do? He smiled faintly. Who said that? The sale may be legal, but there are other ways to reclaim what's yours. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned forward. How well do you know the buyers? Barely. A young couple. They seemed kind. Then maybe he said softly, you and I should pay them a visit. And the next day, I returned to my old home. The couple, Ethan and Claire Miller, greeted us at the door. They looked nervous, but not unkind. Claire offered tea. I declined. I told them everything, calmly, without anger, about Robert. About the roses, about the memories etched into every wall of that house. When I finished, Ethan sighed. Mrs. Bennett, we had no idea. Daniel said you were fine with it. He told us you'd already moved into senior care. He lied, I said softly. Claire bit her lip. If we'd known, Mr. Whitmore leaned in. The deed is clean, so you have no legal obligation. But perhaps there's another arrangement. My client needs a place to live. You have a big house. Would you consider renting a room to her? The couple exchanged glances. Then Ethan nodded slowly. She can have the downstairs room. We were planning to rent it anyway. Tears burned my eyes. It wasn't much, but it was home. One evening, while organizing some old papers in a box, I found a thin envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. Inside was a property tax document, and on the back, scribbled in Daniel's handwriting, were numbers. Large sums transferred from my account into something labeled DB Capital Investments. I froze. That was Daniel's firm, the same one he'd bragged about years ago, a family business, he called it. Now he'd stolen not just my home, but my savings too. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my purse. The next day I called Harold again. Margaret, Ramu, he said, scanning the paper. This could be everything we need. If he used your medical funds or assets for personal gain, that's financial exploitation and it's a felony. I nodded slowly. I don't want him in jail, Harold. I just want him to learn. He smiled knowingly. And you will teach him, won't you? Yes, I said softly, but not with anger. With silence. For the next 2 months, I played the part of the frail, forgiving mother. When Daniel called, I spoke kindly. When Melissa visited, I smiled. Mom, Daniel said once, I'm glad you're settling into that rental. It's best for you, yes, dear, I said sweetly. You always know what's best for me. But what he didn't know was that I'd already begun something quietly, something he'd never expect. Harold and I restructured my remaining savings and started a trust fund under my name, using some inheritance Robert had left untouched. That fund began buying shares, not random ones, but small portions of Daniel's own company through a shell investor. Within 6 months, I owned 11% of DB Capital. Silently. Daniel never noticed. One rainy evening, Melissa stopped by. She looked weary, like guilt had been gnawing at her for months. Mom, she whispered, sitting on the couch beside me, I can't sleep at night. Daniel said it was business, but it feels wrong. You built that home. We took it from you. I took her hand. I forgave you, Melissa. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequence. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Please don't hate him. He's your son. I smiled sadly. Yes. And even the prodigal son must face his truth. 3 months later, I sent Daniel a letter, written in my shaky handwriting. Dear Daniel, I want to talk. Let's meet at the house next Sunday. Love, Mom. He arrived early. His expensive car, polished shoes, a smug confidence that made my stomach turn. Mom, he said, kissing my cheek, good to see you looking well. You've settled nicely here. Yes, I said softly. It feels like home again. We sat in the living room. Ethan and Claire had gone out, giving us privacy. Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee. So, what did you want to discuss? I slid a folder across the table. He opened it and froze. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, and documents linking DB Capital to the stolen funds. His face went pale. Where did you... I cut him off gently. From the lawyer who taught me not to underestimate myself. He swallowed hard. Mom, I can explain. No need, I said quietly. I already know. And now, so does the board. His head snapped up. What? I smiled. Remember that investment partner you mentioned last year? The one you never met in person? He blinked. That was me, Daniel. Daniel sat frozen, his fingers trembling over the folder. For the first time in years, his voice cracked. Mom, you invested in my company? I leaned back on the chair, holding my teacup gently. Yes, dear, quietly. Through someone you trusted, I wanted to see what kind of man my son had become. He blinked rapidly. You don't understand. It wasn't theft. I borrowed the money. I planned to, I interrupted softly, to pay it back when? After I died. Silence. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the room. Daniel looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen him. All his arrogance, his confidence melted into the floor. "You always said I was your role model," I whispered. "When you were 10, you bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me I was your queen." "What happened to that boy, Daniel?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Life happened, Mom." "Debt, pressure. The company needed funds. I thought I could handle it." I smiled faintly. "And selling your mother's home was part of handling it?" His lips parted, but no sound came. "You didn't even visit me in the hospital," I continued. "Do you know what that felt like? Waking up to find the bed beside you empty, the nurse saying, 'Your son signed the papers. You'll be moving soon.'" Tears welled in his eyes. "I made a mistake." "No," I said softly. "You made a choice." I slid another envelope toward him. Inside were documents from Mr. Whitmore. Legal, clean, precise. "These are the transfer deed," I said calmly. "You will transfer back what you took. The house funds, the investments, the inheritance, every cent." He looked up sharply. "Oh, what? You'll sue me?" I shook my head. "No, Daniel, I'll do something far worse." He frowned, confused. I smiled. "I'll tell the world who you really are." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I've been quiet for too long," I said softly. "You see, DB Capital shareholders, they adore you. The young visionary, the man who builds trust." He swallowed. "But what happens, Abe?" I continued, "when they learn that the man they trust stole from his dying mother? That he used her pain to build his empire?" He froze. You could almost hear his heart stop. I stood up slowly, my cane tapping the floor like a gavel. "You won't go to jail, Daniel. That would be too easy. You'll live, you'll work, but every single time you step into that office, you'll remember whose name built your company and reward the stand and whose heart you broke to do it." A week later, Daniel resigned as CEO. He told the board it was for personal reasons. I didn't attend the press conference, but I watched it on television. The same house that once felt stolen, now filled with quiet satisfaction. Melissa sat beside me, holding my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "you actually did it." I smiled softly. "No, dear. I didn't destroy him. I just gave him a mirror months past." Daniel avoided me, but word reached me through Jacob. He'd sold his sports car, moved into a smaller apartment, started teaching finance at a community college. "He's different now," Jacob said one afternoon, pruning the roses, humbled. I nodded. Sometimes humility is the only way to find the truth again. Melissa visited more often, cooking my favorite dishes, fixing things around the house. Her laughter returned, timid at first, then stronger. The house began to feel alive again. The ghost of betrayal slowly replaced by the scent of forgiveness. The following Christmas, exactly 1 year after my return, I decided to host dinner. The table was the same oak one Robert and I bought 50 years ago. I set it with our old silverware, polished until it gleamed. Melissa helped with the turkey. Jacob brought the wine. And Daniel. He came last. He stood at the doorway, hesitant, holding a small wrapped box. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I smiled gently. "It's your mother's home. You should always feel welcome." He stepped in slowly, eyes wandering across the familiar walls, the photos, the scent of cinnamon. "I almost forgot what it felt like," he murmured. I handed him a plate. "Then remember it well." We ate mostly in silence. The tension was fragile but warm. After dessert, he slid the gift toward me. "Open it," he whispered. Inside was a small glass frame, a photo, of our house with me standing by the roses, smiling. Below it, engraved words read, "Home is where she forgives you." Tears filled my eyes. He looked down. "I'm sorry, Mom. For everything, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see now." I reached out and placed my wrinkled hand on his. "I forgave you long before you knew you needed it." That night, after everyone left, I walked to the garden. The moonlight fell on the roses, red, vibrant, alive again. I whispered to the wind, "Robert, I did it." Not through anger, but through truth. The breeze seemed to carry his laughter, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. Ethan and Claire decided to move to another state for work. Before leaving, they offered to sell the house back to me at the same price they'd bought it. With the recovered funds from Daniel, I bought it without hesitation. The papers were signed, the home was mine again. And then something almost poetic happened. Daniel's business ventures had failed. He called me one evening, his voice soft, hesitant. "Mom, my lease ends next month. I can't find anything affordable near my new job. Do you know anyone renting?" I looked out the window, smiling to myself. "Yes," I said gently. "I know someone." A week later, Daniel moved into the guest room, the same one I once rented from Ethan and Claire. And every month, he handed me a small envelope of rent money. Not as a son supporting his mother, but as a man repaying what he once took for granted. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a dinner table and time. This was my story. I lost everything, my home, my trust, my family's respect, but I found something stronger. The quiet strength to take it all back without shouting, without hate, just truth. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you love, remember this. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means reclaiming your peace on your terms. Thank you for listening to my story. You're watching Revenge's Echo. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of silent revenge and redemption. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your children sold your home while you were in a hospital? The winter passed slowly, almost like time itself was observing. Snow blanketed Ridgefield in white, silence in streets, softening the edges of my grief. I walked through the halls of my home, touching familiar surfaces, the oak banister, the worn carpet in the living room, the faded wallpaper in the hallway, and each touch reminded me of Robert, of the children, of the years of laughter and love. Daniel had settled into his modest rental, the guest room I had let him occupy. Every month, the rent checks arrived on time. No excuses, no complaints. It wasn't about money. It was about a lesson he could not unlearn. Melissa began visiting more often. Her eyes were softer now. She spoke to me not as a mother commanding, but as a daughter learning respect. "Mom," she said one afternoon, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies, "I wanted to apologize again. I never should have stood by Daniel like that." I smiled gently, taking a cookie. "It's all right, Melissa. You're learning. That's what matters." Jacob had always been my quiet one, the dreamer, the gentle soul. He now came by every week to help with the garden, to water the roses, to prune the lilacs. We talked for hours about art, about life, about how choices define us. "Mom," he said one day, kneeling beside a rose bush, "I've been thinking I don't want to be like Daniel. I want to make sure I honor the family, not take advantage of it." I placed my wrinkled hand on his shoulder. You never will, Jacob. I see the goodness in you. Never let the world harden your heart. He smiled faintly. I'm glad you're back here. This house, it feels right again. Yes, I whispered. It's home. Daniel's transformation was slow. At first, he avoided eye contact. He spoke minimally. But over time, he began to show subtle changes. One morning, he asked me to help him balance his new budget for his small business. Another day, he quietly offered to assist with repairs in the house. He was humbled, and he knew it. And every time I looked at him, I remembered that silence can be a louder teacher than anger. It wasn't vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was about awakening understanding. And Daniel was learning, painfully, humbly, truthfully. Word got around that the Bennett's house had returned to its rightful owner. Neighbors whispered about how Mrs. Bennett, once frail and alone, had regained control over her life and property. Some said it was luck. Others claimed it was divine intervention, but I knew better. It was neither luck nor magic. It was patience, silence, strategy, and the quiet strength that comes from living a life of integrity. By spring, the garden had bloomed anew. Red roses, white lilies, purple tulips, a vibrant symphony of colors. I planted a small row of sunflowers along the fence, their bright faces turned to the sun. A reminder that life continues to grow, even after betrayal. Melissa moved in temporarily while her new job stabilized. Jacob continued his visits, sometimes bringing a friend along to teach painting, and Daniel, he walked the halls slowly, often looking at the walls, perhaps recalling his misdeeds. One evening, I decided to host a dinner, and the first since the betrayal. The table was set as it used to be. Candles, fine china, and silverware polished to a shine. We dined slowly. We laughed timidly at first, then more freely. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, thank you for giving me a second chance. I don't deserve it, but I'll work every day to become better, to be worthy of your trust again. I looked at him. Daniel, we all deserve redemption. It's not about forgetting mistakes. It's about learning from them. Melissa nodded. Jacob smiled faintly, the light of understanding in his eyes. That night, after the children had gone to bed, I sat by the window. The moonlight reflected on the frost-kissed roses. I whispered a quiet prayer. Robert, I murmured, we did it. We survived. We taught them, not through anger, but through wisdom. The wind carried a soft rustle through the trees, almost like laughter. I smiled. Peace had returned, not just to the house, but to my heart. Betrayal hurts, sometimes from those we trust the most, but revenge doesn't always need to be loud or destructive. Silence, patience, and the quiet reclaiming of what's rightfully yours can teach a lesson stronger than any punishment. I am Margaret Bennett. I lost my home, my trust, my faith in my children, but through quiet determination, I regained what was mine and taught them the value of respect, truth, and humility. Remember, silence is a powerful teacher, and justice can be gentle, patient, and wise. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to Revenge's Echo for more real-life stories of silent revenge, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, painting the walls of the Bennett home in a soft golden hue. I sipped my tea, the warmth spreading through my hands. And for the first time in over a year, I felt complete. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt alive again. The roses in the garden were blooming. The yellow kitchen gleamed in the morning sun, just as it had decades ago. Daniel was awake in his small room upstairs, quietly packing his school supplies to head to his finance class. Melissa was in the kitchen humming softly while arranging breakfast. Jacob was already out in the garden, humming a tune, painting small sketches of flowers. Peace. It was simple, yet profound. Over the past year, Daniel had changed more than I could have imagined. The boy who had sold his mother's home out of impatience and greed had grown into a man of humility and patience. He no longer bragged about his business achievements. He volunteered at community programs, tutored young students, and even helped elderly neighbors with their taxes and paperwork. I watched him one morning bouncing his books in the living room, and I realized something. Sometimes consequence teach better than words ever could. He glanced up and our eyes met. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine remorse, not just fear. Mom, he whispered quietly. Thank you for everything. I smiled softly. You earned it, Daniel. Now live with it and let it guide you. The house itself had become more than just brick and mortar. It was a symbol of lessons learned, of love, of forgiveness, and of quiet justice. I spent my mornings tending to the roses Robert had planted. I baked cookies with Melissa in the afternoons. Jacob and I painted little murals on the walls, a reminder of art, hope, and creativity. Even the youngest neighbors came to hear stories of the grand old house and its history. I told them tales, not of betrayal, but of resilience, patience, and quiet strength. The house had survived storms before, and now it had survived human betrayal. Stronger, brighter, full of life again. One evening, I decided to invite all three children, Daniel, Melissa, and Jacob, to sit down for a proper conversation. I wanted them to understand the depth of my feelings and the lessons they should carry forward. We sat in the living room around the oak table where countless memories had been made. Children, I began softly, I want to talk about this past year. Melissa looked down, her hands fidgeting. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jacob was silent, attentive, his eyes filled with compassion. I lost trust, I continued. I lost my home, my sense of security, and for a while, I lost hope. But I also realized something important. Silence and patience can be more powerful than anger. Daniel swallowed. Yes, Mom, he said quietly. I understand now. You see, I said, I didn't seek revenge in the way you might imagine. I let truth and patience teach you the lesson instead. And I hope you've learned it. Daniel nodded slowly. Melissa's eyes glistened. Jacob squeezed my hand. Yes, Mom, they said in unison. We understand. I took a deep breath. This is your gift, I said softly. Not just my forgiveness, but also a chance to rebuild yourself. Use it wisely. Tears rolled down Melissa's cheeks. Daniel looked at the floor, humbled. Jacob smiled faintly, understanding the magnitude of what had just happened. That night, I lay in bed listening to the quiet hum of the house. The past year's pain was still there, but it was softened by the power of forgiveness, love, and the knowledge that I had reclaimed what was mine without hate. Months later, Daniel came to me quietly, handing over an envelope. Mom, I want you to have this, he said. It's my first full paycheck since the company reset. I want to contribute to the house, for real this time. I smiled. You never had to pay me back, Daniel. What matters is that you've changed. He nodded. I know, but I want to honor you and what you taught me. It was in that moment that I realized revenge doesn't need destruction. It can be a mirror that reflects truth and compels change. Spring turned into summer, and life continued with quiet joy. Neighbors stopped by. Children played in the yard. I baked, tended flowers, painted with Jacob, and watched Daniel quietly rebuild his life. Melissa helped organize old photo albums, bringing back memories and laughter. Evenings were spent with warm tea, soft music, and the faint aroma of roses from the garden. I knew this peace was earned, not given. It was a testament to resilience, patience, and the enduring power of quiet strength. Betrayal can feel like the end of everything you love, but revenge is not always about anger, not always about punishment. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is patience, sometimes it is teaching a lesson without raising a voice. I am Margaret Bennett. I lost my home. I lost trust. I lost hope. But through quiet strength, wisdom, and patience, I reclaimed my life and taught those who betrayed me a lesson they would never forget. Remember, forgiveness does not mean weakness. It means reclaiming your power. And sometimes justice is a gentle hand guiding the lost back to truth. If you felt inspired or moved by this story, please like this video, subscribe to Revenge's Echo, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Every story here is real. Every lesson is powerful. And every silent revenge is a story waiting to be told.